All right, let's get right into this. Back in 2017, law enforcement pulled off what might be one of the most brilliant digital stings in history. See, they didn't just shut down a huge dark web market, they secretly took it over, and they weaponized the one thing that community relies on: trust. This is the story of Operation Bayonet. So just imagine for a second, you're part of this massive online criminal underworld. And then one day, the two biggest places you do business, Alpha Bay and Hansa, they just disappear, vanish. Panic starts to set in, right? The servers are down, the forums are dark. It looks like a huge, coordinated bust. And it was, but not in the way anyone could have possibly expected. Because this is where the story gets really wild. What if one of those markets wasn't actually offline at all? What if it was still very much online, welcoming all these new panicked users, but was secretly being run by the very same authorities who were trying to take it down? Yeah, that's the absolute masterstroke at the heart of this entire operation. Now, to really understand how they pulled this off, we first have to get a handle on the environment they were working in. So let's talk about the dark web, a place that's built from the ground up for anonymity, which, as you can probably guess, attracts a whole lot of crime. So, what even is the dark web? Well, put simply, it's a part of the internet that your normal search engine, like Google, just can't find. You need special software to get there, and the most famous one is the Tor browser. Now, just using the dark web isn't illegal, but its powerful privacy features, well, they make it the perfect hiding place for all sorts of illicit activities. And believe me, the business of crime is absolutely booming there. You can find pretty much anything. We're talking about ransomware kits sold like they're just another software subscription, massive databases of stolen personal data, credit cards, social security numbers, all of it. It's also a huge hub for laundering cryptocurrency and, of course, for selling all kinds of illegal products. And the piece of tech that makes all this anonymity possible is called Tor, which actually stands for the onion router, and that name is the perfect metaphor for how it works. It is all about layers. Okay, so here's the simple version. When you use Tor, your internet connection gets bounced through at least 3 random computers all over the world. These are called relays. Your data gets wrapped in multiple layers of encryption, just like an onion. And as it passes through each relay, one layer gets peeled off. The result? No single point in that chain knows both who you are and where you're going. It makes you, for all intents and purposes, anonymous. So if criminals are wrapped up in all these digital layers of anonymity, how on earth do the police even begin to fight back? Well, it turns out they've developed a pretty sophisticated toolkit for hunting in these digital shadows. It's really this mix of old-school police work and seriously cutting-edge tech. International collaboration is absolutely crucial. Agencies like Europol and the FBI are working together constantly. They use blockchain analysis to follow the money, even with crypto. They still run classic undercover ops, and they gather tons of open-source intelligence. But their most powerful and maybe most controversial tool, it's hacking. The official term for it is a network investigative technique, or a NIT. But what it really is a piece of malware that law enforcement can deploy to a suspect's computer once they have a warrant. It's specifically designed to get around Tor's protections and force that computer to reveal its true real-world IP address. It basically de-anonymizes the user. This was used famously in a case called Operation Playpen to unmask thousands of users of a child exploitation website. And that brings us right back to our main story. Now that we understand the battlefield, let's look at how law enforcement set the perfect trap in Operation Bayonet. The timeline here is just critical. On July 4th, the FBI very publicly takes down Alphabay, the #1 market on the dark web. The very next day, its founder is arrested. So for about 2 weeks, the entire dark web is in total chaos. And then on July 20th, the Dutch National Police dropped the bombshell. They had secretly seized control of Hansa, the second biggest market, a full month before any of this happened. You see the brilliant two-pronged strategy here? The FBI makes a very loud, very public spectacle of taking down Alpha Bay. It sows panic and fear everywhere. And meanwhile, the Dutch police are just silently in the background running the Hansa market and waiting. So what happens when the biggest player on the board is suddenly removed? Well, all of its users, we're talking tens of thousands of vendors and buyers, they scramble to find a new, safe place to go. They looked for the most stable, reliable alternative. And where did they all run? They flooded directly onto the Hansa market. And that is the absolute genius of the trap. They were literally running from the police directly into the arms of the police, and they had no idea. Hansa had been turned into a massive digital honeypot, a trap that was perfectly designed to lure in unsuspecting targets. For 27 solid days, authorities weren't just observing these criminals, they were the market administrators. They collected everything. Every single username and password, every private message negotiating a drug deal, all the little details of their Bitcoin transactions, and maybe most incredible of all, the unencrypted shipping addresses for thousands and thousands of packages filled with illegal goods. It was an absolute intelligence goldmine. So instead of just guessing what criminals were up to, investigators were now completely privy to the kind of chatter you see in these underground forums. They could see users openly talking about how to monetize network access. They were basically reading their project plans in real time. Now, Operation Bayonet was a landmark victory, for sure, but the cat-and-mouse game never, ever stops. It forced criminals to evolve, and in turn, it forced law enforcement to evolve. Investigators are constantly finding new ways to peel back those layers of anonymity, as a more recent case out of Germany shows us. In this recent case, German investigators were targeting a user in a criminal chat group called Boytown, and they used this really clever technique called timing analysis. By matching the exact timestamp of a user's messages with spikes in internet traffic, and then using a flaw in an older messaging app, they were able to identify the very first computer in that user's anonymous connection, the guard node. And finding that first link in the chain, that's a huge step toward completely unmasking a target. So, what's the lasting legacy of an operation like Bayonet? Well, it goes way beyond the number of arrests. It's really about psychological warfare. Because here's the most crucial point. The biggest victory for law enforcement wasn't the data they collected or even the people they put behind bars. It was the permanent, crippling destruction of trust within that entire dark web community. After the whole thing went public, the director of Europol sent a very clear message. He said, "The global law enforcement community is tighter than the criminals realize." The operation proved that no market, no matter how big or how secure it seems, is truly safe. The person you think is an admin could be a cop. That friendly user in the forums could be an undercover agent. And that is the true long-term impact. This operation planted a seed of paranoia that has never, ever gone away. It forces every single user on the dark web today to ask themselves a fundamental question that undermines their entire ecosystem. In a world that's built on anonymity, who can you really truly trust?